the October regular meeting of the Meridian Library District. It is 7 o'clock and we are now in session. Our first item of business is public comment. Courtney, I don't see anybody here and I'm assuming there are no public comments, correct? Okay, great, thank you. That takes us now to item number 3 on the agenda, the consent agenda, where we consider routine actions that are not anticipated to require any kind of further discussion. The items for the consent agenda were in the trustees' packets, and hopefully everybody had a chance to review those beforehand. And if there's any questions, we can talk about that. If there's not, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Destiny, go ahead, please.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you.
Second.
Josh, second. Thank you. Does anyone object to adopting the motion? Okay, motion carries on unanimous consent. Thank you. Which takes us now to item number 4, the financial report review. We will turn that over to Nick, please.
Pretty routine end of fiscal year month for August. All the financial reports were in the packet. Happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Mr. Chair,
Please go ahead.
Nick, I just had one question on the credit card statements. It looked like there was pretty large charges at Lowe's and then a credit for almost equal and opposite amounts for one of them. In regards to Pinnacle, was that just a bucket of money type thing, or what was going on there?
Yeah, Chair Cummings, I'm sorry, Trustee Cummings, we purchased 2 refrigerators for the Pinnacle branch, and they were mismeasured by the contractor. They were about 1 inch too big, so we had to return them and get new ones. So that's why we saw 2 such large transactions return.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Other questions from the trustees? I was happy to see the last payment for Silverstone on the list. That was nice to see. And we did have a lot of big purchase items related to Pinnacle, which were unusual, and those amounts were high, but that's not unexpected with the new branch there. The Razer COD laser printer, $15,000, and a 5-day training plan.
Yes, that's correct. The full spectrum laser units that we have right now that were, they're still at Unbound. There were some quality issues. They were failing. And we saw an opportunity. I talked to Emma and we had the budgeting because we were not able to get Orchard Park signage installed in time. We were able to divert that money and purchase this laser from San Antonio Laser, which Vasile recommended. And part of that device was 5 days of training that included, we just had to pay for the branch manager to go out there.
Yeah, I saw the photograph in Nick's report. Big machine.
It's big, and we had to disassemble it just to get inside and then reassemble it. And yeah, so that was fun.
Okay, I'll go check it out. Emma, welcome. We just went on ahead. I hope that's okay. Okay. No, I know how that goes. All right. If there are no other further questions or comments regarding the financials, I would entertain a motion for this action item.
Mr. Chair.
Josh, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the August financial reports as published.
Thank you. We have a motion.
Second.
And we have a second. If there is no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up is the janitorial contract. We had materials in our packet for this item as well, and I imagine there's some other explanations you'd like to talk us through. Jason?
Yeah, Chair Kohler, this is pretty standard. Every year we have a contract that comes up. We're actually a couple of weeks into it already. Jan Pro has agreed to give us a 1-month individual stopgap month, just so we can have this contract approved by the board because of its size. We're looking at $147,600 for a year of janitorial services for all our locations. The second bid came in at $149,280. And then the third bid came at 160, 152.
Can you repeat those, please?
Sure. JanPro was 147,600. Anago, ANAGO, was 149,280. And First Class was 160, 152.
And the incumbent is Jan Pro, correct?
Yes, that's correct. We're still at the point where the entire bid is still under 150,000, our legal threshold to force a bid. So we, in good faith with the public, solicited 3 informal bids, and these were the 3 bids that came back. Next year, with the way things are going, we will have to go through the formal bidding process, RFP, all that good stuff.
I noticed that the QT janitorial proposal just had a dollar amount. I'm assuming that they had the same scope of work as the others, and that their
Yes, that's
intention is to provide the same scope of work.
yes, that's correct. Steve, our maintenance coordinator, went through every building and described the scope of work, and JanPro, being the incumbent, was aware of everything they needed.
I've got a few more questions, but I'll let. What's our action item tonight? What do we need to know, and what do we need to do?
At this point, because of the dollar value, we would like the board to approve the amount because we're encumbering a decent chunk of change.
Okay. But have you selected a vendor?
Right now, our recommendation is that the board approves JanPro as the vendor.
Thank you. That makes sense. Okay. So with that, now that I understand,
Mr. Chair.
yes, please.
So as per our financial policy, we're required to bring something of this magnitude before the board before moving forward. And then our recommendation is to go with the lowest bid offer, assuming that all have met the criteria, which they have. And so that is why we're making that recommendation, and why we're bringing this contract before you, is because it has crossed the threshold for purchasing that staff can do without coming to the board. And so this requires board action for us to be able to move forward.
Okay. From a service standpoint, have there been any issues with JanPro that would cause us to reconsider their services?
Yeah, historically in the past, we've had a couple of issues. In this last year, though, they've really improved their quality of service. But in years before, in fact, even in the prior year, before this year we just finished up, there were issues of people not showing up, and we were able to contact the franchise owner of the JanPro franchise here, and he was able to come out with his supervisors and address the issues. So in the last 12 months, we haven't seen hardly any issues.
Mr. Chair.
Please go ahead.
Jason, I had a question about the scope of work. They all spelled out after-hour service. Is that process handled by, one point of contact having a set of master keys, or, as far as security to the building and contents, that sort of thing? Talk me through how that process works, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so the only place that the JanPro employee has a key is for this location, and it's because we locked that back door. Otherwise, all the other locations, they have an RFID badge. They badge into the building, it disarms everything, and then they do their work, and then they leave.
And just to clarify, if the board does, go with the staff recommendation to continue the same contract with JanPro, it will be a matter of public record for the other companies that will have access to not only what the scope of work was, but the numbers involved, so they can maybe tailor their bids in the future, and we can get into a much more cutthroat environment, if you will, to save the library district money next year when it comes up for RFP or that process.
Right, absolutely. What we anticipated on going out to a formal RFP process this year, but the bids came in much lower, some of our initial bids. So I don't anticipate at 147,600. I don't foresee that being not hitting that $150,000 threshold going forward. And I think having the RFP process, the formal RFP bidding process, is going to help encourage the competition that you're referencing.
Okay, awesome. And I think, just to clarify, if staff has anything, a large dollar item, because you could easily break this into quarterly contract, for example, and it would never meet the requirements to be within the purview of the board. Is that correct?
Yes and no. That's not the spirit of public purchasing laws. If you break it up into like if we had Dan Pro do 2 buildings and someone else do 2 buildings, the total amount of that building because it's the same service, it would be flagged by the Department of Purchasing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Destiny, Laura, any questions?
Is, Mr. Chair?
Please.
Jason, is there a barrier to entering a multi-year contract or like a one-year contract with option to extend in order to get that price a little bit lower? Or is that prohibited somehow by our?
It's absolutely possible. We just need a non-appropriation clause. If we can't fund it the following subsequent years, then yeah, we have an out. But absolutely, we can explore that for future. If we did a 3-year contract, what kind of savings would we see?
I would add, because we are so close to that threshold, there's usually escalators in a lot of those types of contracts. And so the potential of it hitting the threshold with which we would need to go out for RFP, we would want to make sure that we don't build that in until we've probably gone out to that RFP and built that into the bidding contract itself for what we're looking for, just to kind of make sure that we're fully covered going forward.
Thank you.
Anything? Okay, seeing no further questions or comments, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve Jan Pro for our material service, our janitorial contract.
Second?
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 6, the director's monthly report. Nick, I feel like the report should have just been Pinnacle. I mean, that alone would be a fabulous month, but I'll let you talk more.
That would be a fabulous month. We'll start off with the slide deck here with our foundation. They were fundamental in us being able to do some of the things that we've currently done to enhance and beautify the space out at Pinnacle. They hosted their second annual, well, I shouldn't say annual, their second Century of City of Stories fundraising event at Pinnacle before we opened. We had several people there. They were able to sell a lot of early learning toys, and they also were able to get some things like plants and pictures into the space at Pinnacle. So we were very pleased to have them help us with everything Pinnacle related. And we, as you said, we're so thrilled to get Pinnacle open. I was extremely thrilled to finish the COP financing and purchase and sale agreement at the beginning of September. We were anxiously waiting to get those pieces off our plate and move on to actually running the building. So very happy to have that behind us and moving forward. Our human resources, we wanted to show a few different stats. In your report, you have a lot more stats. So I won't try and pull out every single stat that we put into the board report this month. And hopefully the reconfigured board report was manageable. I know it got a little long, but this is just showing our full-time versus part-time from last fiscal, well, 2 fiscal years now ago for fiscal year 23 and then for fiscal year 24. They're almost identical with the lone exception of our junior librarians being the temporary part-time that you see in fiscal year 24. So we're almost equally split with full-time and part-time staff. In our branches in September, we had 163 total programs. They were pretty well spread out for the various ages, as you can see here. The pictures that we have included are from the first story time at Pinnacle, which was on the day of the ribbon cutting. And at that story time, they had 122 people across. Yeah. Stroller parking is definitely something you have to consider at these locations. We had a lot of people that were interested in that. And not only that, across the district with those 163 programs, we had over 4,700 participants in the month of September. And so very proud of our branches and the programs that they're putting out there for um, the public. I will say this is also without being open at Silverstone for the month of September. And so, um, despite being down a branch, we were still able to put out 163 programs. This is our room reservations, and it is a comparison of Orchard Park, Cherry Lane, and Unbound for fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 24 in the fourth quarter. So for the fourth quarter for us, that is July, August, and September. And the blue is this year, green is, or this past fiscal year, and green is fiscal year 23. And so pretty even across the board from a change standpoint. Um, they've stayed relatively similar, with some going up, some going down, but nothing astronomical in any direction. But as you can see, our rooms get used a lot. And then this is pulling from the database usage table that was in the board report. These are the 4 of our most used databases that we have. And again, trying to show and contrast fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 24. So we went up with Newsbank, and we went up a little bit in Value Line, but we went down with Niche Academy and Reference Solutions. Niche Academy is one of those ones where we can have some curated training platform pieces. And so that one kind of comes down to how much are we pushing that versus some of our other ones. In fiscal year 24, we got a new database called Gale Udemy, and that is a much more robust training platform. And so seeing the Niche Academy numbers go down is not surprising. Reference Solutions, I'm not entirely certain why it was so high in fiscal year 23 versus fiscal year 24. I don't know. Jason, do you have any insight on that one?
My guess would be coming out of really kind of running out of COVID. I think a lot of folks were looking at the ability to kind of do a lot of competitive analysis for jobs and businesses, things like that.
And also, I would add, it's very easy to get a few power users that can make those numbers go up fairly quickly if they're jumping in there multiple times a week to access information. So with that being said, happy to answer any questions on those last few slides that you may have before I turn it over to Vasile.
Questions for Nick? I may have some questions in a bit, but we'll go to Vasile first.
Sure. Mr. Chair, trustees, we want to give you an overview of professional development in fiscal year 24. We'll present some statistics, but professional development is something we take very seriously, and we encourage our staff to, seek opportunities in which way to better themselves. So just some highlights is we had 2 employees receive tuition assistance towards getting their library degrees, their master's degrees. 1 employee went to a project management certification course at Boise State, something we're looking into doing again in the future. They had nothing but good things to say about it. As we mentioned about the laser, those machines have a really steep learning curve. So we did send our branch manager to San Antonio to really get an in-depth hands-on training. And we had a fun day, an introspective day. Managers and supervisors, we took a DISC assessment. And if any of you are familiar with that, it's personality types and ways of engaging. But it was focused on conflict resolution and how we could better work with one another, with our staff, and with patrons. So that was something that was very meaningful, and we took a lot away from that. So professional development, fiscal year 24, we spent a total of, I'll have to see here because I might need some glasses, $62,378.11. So the majority of that, 52%, went to conferences. After that, the second highest was staff meeting and training supported. supported from what I learned recently is didn't come out of our budget. It was things like staff day that are supported by the Friends of the Library, ICFL first time attendance grants for conferences, those sort of things. After that, we had staff meeting and training, 7,200, 77 and 29 cents, followed by what do we have? Memberships, webinars, and education. So we, as you can see, we invest in our staff, and I think we have a very high return on investment here. And this was a fun little infographic we wanted to give you guys. So we went, far beyond Idaho. Courtney, who's sitting behind us here, she actually was the one who went to Juneau, Alaska. So I think she had a great time. I think she got a lot out of that. That was PNLA. We had 3 people go to San Diego for ALA. We had 3 of our programmers who do early learning went to Denver for ALSC. And I forget all the acronyms. You'll have to forgive me, but my fun map wouldn't have fit if I wrote down the whole things. But yeah, we had, ABOS, that's Bookmobile. Actually, Audra is there right now. This was last year at this time that she went to Hershey, Pennsylvania, which I've always wanted to go to myself, but I digress. So yeah, as you can see, we went all over the country. Our staff had a great time, learned a lot, and they're bringing all that back to our patrons here.
Thank you. Back to you.
And that was it. We tried to keep it a little short and sweet, but like I said, we put a lot more details that don't necessarily present well on screen. So wanted to highlight some of the pieces that were in our new consolidated director report that has the 3 divisions, admin, branches, and operations all together, and then a section at the end for statistics, and then to be able to present some of that to you all here. We're happy to continue to refine how we put that report together and how we present it, but wanted to try and keep it relatively simple in terms of what we presented tonight, and then happy to answer any questions that we presented tonight or that were in our report or in general for that matter. So
Thank you. Questions or comments from the trustees for either Nick or Vasile?
Mr. Chair,
Please.
one thing that kind of jumped out at me, $62,000 for professional development is, hey, that's great, but that's like 1% of a $6 million personnel payroll budget. Off the top of my head, I don't know the fiscal year budget numbers, if that's a line item. Is it?
it is.
And has it been running about 1% of payroll?
We actually, I think 2 fiscal years ago, almost doubled the amount that we put into professional development. And so that is something that we budget even higher than that typically. But depending on what conferences people end up attending, it typically falls short of what we budget. But it is something that we have Jason and Vasile that are in charge of professional development now, looking at how do we plan and execute on that plan throughout the fiscal year to spend as much of what has been budgeted, and then to also work with Emma and her committee for grants and sponsorships on how we can do even more than what is budgeted by getting additional supported dollars to come in. So we would love to put more towards it, but we have to be pretty tight right now as we've opened new branches and then with the salary scale change as well. So it's something that I would like to put more towards, but probably not significantly so for the next few fiscal years.
Fair enough. I will say, as a trustee, I would be more than happy to see that run more to the 3 to 5% range for professional development, because those are smart investments, and I think that's a very easily defensible position when it comes to the budget. And I'd be honored to to help carve away from other spots to get that money allocated to the right buckets if that's the appetite in the future.
Thank you. We'd love to have that conversation as we go forward in planning fiscal year 26 and how we could do that. I would also point out we have done a really good job as a staff over the last few years, in particular, of working with our committee structure. And one of our committees is training, and they are able to. We can send one person to one of these conferences and have them come back and share what they've learned without sending 5 or 6 people. And so the goal is to maximize the learning but minimize the cost. It's not always the best solution, but it is the most cost-effective solution. But I think, to your point, it would be great to increase that as we go forward.
Additional questions or comments? Please go ahead.
Mr. Chair, Director Grove, I have some questions and comments about, first of all, comments. I want to say thank you to Nick and Emma for the work on the COP financing. That was exciting. It was really cool. I really do like the additional information in the reports. It helps tell the story better. I do have questions about the databases because I see that in terms of users versus downloads, we have some super users for sure. And then I just had questions about it. Is a download anytime a person accesses a database?
Not quite. It is two different metrics that we follow. Sometimes it's what you see is people logging in.
Mhm.
And accessing the information. Those are some of the larger numbers you see. And then the downloads is if there's an opportunity for it to download the video on.
Okay.
It's just even in the streaming sense is where you see that.
That's where I was a little confused about because I didn't think you'd have to be a user and download.
Yeah, the only time you will really see a download is the Libby app. Yeah, for an ebook or audiobook.
Right. Thank you.
I also had a question on the database. You said you mentioned here in your report, Nick, that one of your efforts this year would be to expand the use of the databases to more patrons and stuff. I'm just curious, how do you go about doing that in the library?
Yeah, so historically in the past, we've put out on our digital signage, we put it on our website, use Unbound to really kind of push it with the patrons. But we discovered there's always a disconnect. You know, what is Gale? What is, Ref USA? What is this stuff? So moving forward, we're going to change to the tact. We're not going to train patrons how to use it. We're going to train employees how to use it. So if a patron comes in and says, "Hey, I need to do this. I need to do some. I just moved in the area. I started a business. I want to start hitting people who have just moved in the area. How do I do that?" Well, we have a great program called Ref USA. So it's really training our employees on how to better sell it versus trying to get patrons to go, "Oh, hey, look, this cool thing's available."
I would add to that, one of the things that we've been talking about is having that targeted piece of, let's say, Mango languages is going to be November. Using that as an example, because we haven't discussed any of the specifics, but making sure that we talk about that in the programs that we do across the board for that month. And also me being able to bring that here to the board meeting and being able to talk about one specific digital resource that we have, one database that we have, and being able to share that here as well, so that it's not just the shotgun approach, that it's, yes, we have all of these, but we're going to talk about this one today, and being able to dive into a little bit more of, for you all, some of the metrics, but also what is it and why is it? Because there are a few different ways that we have databases. We have the databases that we pay for, and then we have databases that the state pays for. And so the state pays for them through the Idaho Commission for Libraries. They have what are called Lily databases. It's the, see if I can pull this library, no. I don't remember exactly what it is. It's LILI dot org. I know that, but they pay for a lot of different databases that we can use. Any Idaho resident can use, and we make available through our website. So there are two different layers. We'll probably primarily focus on the ones that we pay for when we're talking in this meeting, but I would like to be able to dive into one specific one each month, at least to let you know what we are providing to the public. So, libraries linking Idaho. So, as Vasile was saying earlier, libraries are really great at coming up with acronyms. So much so that we have them everywhere for every single thing.
All right. If there are no further comments or questions, we will move on now to item number 7. We have a couple of job descriptions to approve here that were listed in our packet. The first one is the Material Services Manager position, and we will follow that up with the Digital Services Librarian position. We will approve those separately, but I think we can listen to the dialogue around that at the same time.
So the Material Services Manager position is one that we brought back about a year or plus ago. And with that, we knew that we needed to get someone into the position and then be able to make modifications. So that is why it's not in consent agenda, and it's here for action because it has more than just cursory changes as we really look at how to best utilize that position going forward. The Digital Services Librarian is one that I believe I was the first person to have that title in the district back in 2015. It has been at least 4 different things in terms of what that position has prioritized. And so with that being said, we've looked at it, and what we need to do with the position going forward at this time is to change it from Digital Services Librarian to Digital Resources Librarian. And that will allow the position to move into the Material Services department and have a better, a more focused attention on some of our digital resources, our databases, our e-content, and some of our like digitization aspects. And so that is why that one has a little bit more changes, and similar to last month with the executive assistant being the executive manager, this one, when approved, will need to be approved with the title change from Digital Services to Digital Resources Librarian.
Questions from the trustees? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion, and as Nick pointed out, we, as the motion, as part of the motion, do we need to say the old name and the new name?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Destiny, please go ahead.
I'll first move to approve the Material Services Manager job description.
Thank you.
Second.
And we have a motion and a second. All in favor of approving the Material Services Manager job description as discussed and outlined in our packets, please indicate.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that one carries.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, please.
I move to approve the Digital Services Librarian job description renamed as the Digital Resources Librarian.
We have a motion
Second.
and a second. Further comments? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 8, some policy revisions. And there are 4 here that were listed in our packet. And similar to the job descriptions, we can discuss all 4 and then vote on them individually, if that's okay with you, Nick.
So these are all, with the exception of the employee handbook that's listed. The other 3 are just part of our annual cycle of review. And with the record retention policy, It is accompanied by the record retention schedule. And with both those and the conflict of interest policy, we sent to our legal counsel. They did a full rewrite of these 3 documents, and the versions that you see in front of you tonight are the result of the legal counsel's rewrite and recommendation for how those should look going forward. I would note the retention schedule is one we will continue to probably refine and dive deeper into as we look at best practices for our district. And yes, it is a lot.
Tell me what is the item for the employee handbook?
Sorry. The employee handbook. So when we made changes to the salary schedule, one of the things that we had to do with the rate of pay for supervisors, for the supervisor position, was to move it from exempt to non-exempt. As such, there was a benefit loss to those individuals for how PTO is allocated. And so we wanted to clean up the PTO schedule and then change it also so that it was not just an non-exempt piece, but it was a supervisor, manager, and exempt portion on the PTO allocation. And one of the primary reasons that it had to go from exempt to non-exempt is we have a human resources legal counsel. They advise us on best practices, and then they tell us if a position can or cannot be exempt, and it has to meet certain strict federal guidelines on what qualifies and what doesn't. And there are a lot of exempt changes to federal guidelines that have already started to go into place, and then a big one in January that is forthcoming that will change the dollar amount at which a minimum amount has to be paid, and we'll be just shy of that for the minimum starting wage of the supervisor. And so that was a primary reason in moving that position from non-exempt to exempt. And so to not have them lose what they currently have, and to have another incentive for staff to take that jump from librarian or associate librarian or even a library assistant to supervisor, having that coincide with the current exempt PTO policy. A lot of words to say, trying to clean it up and make it easier.
With legal advice.
Correct.
Thank you. Questions from the trustees?
Mr. Chair,
Please go ahead.
Nick, is the intention to have full, like a legal rewrite of all of the policies as they come up, or are we just talking things like records retention or conflict of interest that are sort of more legally relevant? And if that is the intention, does this become like prohibitively expensive at some point? That's a lot of legal hours.
Well, it would be a lot of legal hours if we didn't have the legal counsel that we have. He is very quick. And some of these have been full rewrites because the red line becomes demonstratively obtrusive to being able to see what it is. And so it's just cleaner to do a rewrite than it is to mark up. For the most part, we don't have to make wholesale changes on some of these, but he's looking at these so that they're consistent. And so we might have more during this probably next 12 months-ish, 9 months probably, to get back around to when we hired them, where there might be more full rewrites. But because we're on an annual cycle with these and not an 18 or 24-month cycle, we'll be fully caught up by August, I think, or at least 2025. And so going forward, all of those would just have minor edits and rewrites. And so to answer your question, yes, it will happen more but not every single time eventually.
Nick, is there a record retention final? I see the draft here.
Hold on, let me,
And my question related to that is at the very top line, there's a red line paragraph here about any item that's not covered by the things below will have a retention period of, and it's blank.
let me
Is
pull
that-
that one up
is-
and,
okay.
and see. It might not have came over when we did the PDF. So
Okay.
let me. Which, sorry, could you repeat?
So I'm looking here at this record retention schedule draft.
Yes. So the draft is the
Is
final.
the final. Okay.
And some of that is because it's in a spreadsheet and
Okay.
not in a document. And so we don't have the same red line ability in a spreadsheet that we do in a document. And so it gets a little messy and harder to do. Something that we are also looking at when we take another look at this. So this is not going to be something that we start working on in 10 months. This is going to be something that we can start working on now. So that when it does come back, it's going to look different.
Okay.
So the draft is the final,
Okay.
and it's what the legal came back with.
And having come from Excel, that probably makes sense because I think this was probably a cell that just got cut off when it was copied and pasted. So can
Yep.
you tell us what that mystery number is for the?
Let me
Just to be,
see.
just so that we're clear on, if it was 5 days, we'd be in trouble here.
Let us look really quick.
Okay, sure. Yeah, take your time. And we've got these other motions to consider and pass as well. So if you want to, and we can always revisit it at the end of the meeting or at a future meeting.
If you want to start tackling the other three, we'll find an answer for you on this one.
Okay, sounds good to me. Josh, you seem hesitant.
Well, we don't technically only do two, because one references the document as the record retention policy. So we kind of-
That's true. Okay, so we have the conflict of interest in the employee handbook. Okay,
Mr. Chair,
Destiny, please.
I move to approve the employee handbook policy as presented.
Thank you. We have a motion
I second.
and a second. Further questions on the employee handbook item? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And any opposed? So the employee handbook is approved.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, please.
I move to approve the conflict of interest.
We have a motion
Second.
and a second. All in favor? Any further questions? All in conflict of interest policy as outlined and discussed, please indicate.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. That one carries.
So we're trying to decipher because it's cut off. It looks like it was just not entered on that.
Okay.
We believe that it is supposed to be 12 months though.
Okay.
And so I'm comfortable going forward with that being edited and making the modification on what we have here.
And if for
to-
some reason it was wrong, we could always read.
we can revisit it in a month. So if it's not listed in the schedule, and this is from my recollection of past versions of this for the last 13 years that I've been doing this, almost 99% positive that's what it's always been, is to have a default of 12 months unless listed below. So the final of that top piece that is in red should end with 12 months.
Josh, please.
Mr. Chair, and Nick, that applies to the very last comment as well in red, that 12 months. Does that create any kind of, for temporary things of no value to the district and only value to the user? 12 months seems like kind of long. Like 30 days would be a more appropriate kind of thing, I would think. Is that, does 12 months create any additional burdens or costs?
So not typically. There are parts in Idaho code that allow you, if it is of inconsequential value, like it's
Yep.
the paper left behind from a hold, that is not a record to retain that, and that can be discarded. So if it does not have value based on what Idaho code states, then there are pieces in Idaho code that allow that, and that is referenced in the policy as well. So not everything has to be a mound of hold receipt papers for 12 months. But yes, anything that is listed here or that is not listed but could have value is essentially what that covers.
Cool. Mr. Chair.
Yes, please, Josh.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the record retention policy as published.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Hearing none, we will, all those in favor of approving the record retention policy as discussed and in our packets, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so now,
Mr. Chair.
yes, please.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the record retention schedule as published with the correction as discussed in the two places for 12 months.
Thank you, Josh.
Second.
And we have a second. Oh, yes, please.
Can I make a friendly amendment, or did I miss my chance?
No, go ahead, please.
The date says in red line January 19th, 2024. I think that we should amend that to be today's date. Am I
It-
wrong?
Mr. Chair, trustee,
Yes,
uh,
go ahead, Nick.
that is when it was last approved.
Okay.
So that automatically
this
Okay.
action, this
that
action will change
automatically
that.
yeah. So that is not one that we have to actively change. That is just essentially a footnote that we see on all the other ones, but because of how it's configured in a spreadsheet versus a document, it's listed there.
You comfortable with that?
Yes.
So we have a motion and a second. Any other questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next up is item number 9, an executive session pursuant to Idaho Code 74-2061B, which is to consider the evaluation, dismissal, or disciplining of, or to hear complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent or public school student. As always, the action to go into executive session is taken by a voice vote. And so I will take that vote at this time. Trustee Knutson
Yes.
and Trustee Hart.
Yes.
And I, Jeff Kohler, also vote yes. So at 7:48, we are in executive session. Thank you, everyone. It is 8:24, and we are now out of executive session and back to the agenda for item number 10, the library director pay approval. I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Destiny, please.
I move to increase Director Grove's salary by 1.5% as of, or effective October 1, 2024, if that is agreeable to our budget and HR folks.
Which I believe it is. Yeah, I don't think there's an issue there.
I would recommend October 13th as the date. It would
'Cause that's the first pay date.
correct. So it'll align with everybody else's.
Okay, and that was our intent. Okay, perfect. I don't
So,
think you need to say
an
anything.
amended motion for October 13th.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion
Second.
and we have a second. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 11, future agenda items. We will be filling our trustee position in the weeks to come. And we have some candidates, and that stay tuned for news on that. And other items that you like to see in the regular meeting for November. Laura?
Mr. Chair, not necessarily November, but upcoming is any legislative, anything that might impact libraries.
Any legislative anything?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
really very broad.
Okay. Do you anticipate that being something from our council or from ICFL?
ICFL.
Okay.
I will look into what we can do. It probably would be something I would consult instead of ICFL, since they're a state agency. It would be more ILA, the
Okay.
lobbying.
Yeah,
Body,
that lady that was at
and
the,
so,
that luncheon the other day.
Yeah, there's the ILA has a lobbyist, and then we also have for Idaho Library Association, there are legislative liaisons, and we have 2 on our staff that represent ILA. So I can figure out something in the future. Currently, we're not hearing anything imminent, but it is still very early. So I can touch base with them.
I'd like to hear an update if we have from MSR anything.
I will have that when there is an
If
update
we have anything.
available.
Okay.
We had a meeting that got pushed to the end of this week. And so we will have information prior to next meeting.
And I presume we'll have our regular rotation of the annual items that fall into that meeting. Josh, Destiny, anything else? Okay. That brings us to the end of the meeting. Item number 12, meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody.